Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. In today's podcast, I am interviewing Kathleen Mautner, who is the Executive Director of Aspire Education. Since beginning her career as a high school teacher in New Orleans, Kathleen has dedicated her career to closing the opportunity gap in education. Kathleen has held district leadership roles focused on improving academic outcomes for all students. She was previously the director of Community Reading Buddies at Aspire, where she brought her passion for literacy development and systems change to CRB. Kathleen holds a BA in Politics and Spanish from Scripps College and an MPP in Education from Vanderbilt University. Thank you so much for joining, Kathleen.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So, was there a first moment that you knew that you wanted to work in the education or literacy field, or was it something that you realized over time?
Yeah, I think it was really something I realized over time, the sort of more experiences that I got. When I was in college and figuring out what I wanted to do after graduation, I knew broadly that I wanted to work to advance social justice. But I didn't know exactly what that would look like. And so I ended up joining Teach for America and became a teacher after college, which is what brought me to New Orleans. And pretty shortly after beginning teaching, I knew that it was the right field for me. I didn't know where it was going to take me exactly, but um, I knew that that was really where my heart was, and so I wanted to do everything I could to help advance that work.
Yeah, that's amazing. And how was your experience as a high school teacher, and what insight did it give you?
Yeah, I loved my kids. I had some really fantastic students, and I liked teaching, and I think it really shaped what I wanted to do next. Because I, as much as I felt like I was serving and supporting my students, that was only a very small fraction of the students um, that I felt like I could reach. And I felt like there was more that I needed to be able to do. And ultimately, I wanted to be able to support education systems wide. And so I realized, sort of as a high school teacher, that, one, the important role that teachers absolutely play, and two, that teachers cannot do it alone. They need support from really all levels. And so that's why I ended up going to graduate school to study education policy after I had taught for several years, because I really wanted to figure out how can I support and ultimately help shift the system on a larger level to really support the outcomes of kids on a broader scale.
It's really cool how your experience teaching at a high school inspired you to look at it on a broader scale and support many other kids around. And how has your background in politics and Spanish influenced your perspective on education and the literacy gap?
Yeah, I think a couple of pieces in particular. One is that I think that, having the politics background, I was always interested in policy and seeing like what that looked like. And so it, made a lot of sense for me to, when I ended up wanting to study education policy in grad school, I think that was a really natural progression in some ways. And then I think with the Spanish piece in particular, I actually ended up writing my senior thesis in college about the education of immigrant youth in Spain. And so I ended up having to write a thesis that hit on both of my majors, both politics and Spanish. And so, and when I had studied abroad in Spain, I had worked at essentially a child development center for immigrant students. And so I really saw like what that looked like in another country in a totally different context. And I wanted to, and I think like that ultimately is what really propelled me to want to like continue what that work looked like here and support it here as well.
I love how your experience in Spain is what like sparked your change and everything that you've done here, and that's really amazing to hear. And throughout your career, what have you learned about the opportunity gap in education, and what do you wish more people knew about it?
Yeah, well, I think the biggest thing is that there's no silver bullet that is going to, oh, if we only do this, then all of these things will get better. And I think often in our discourse it's very, very tempting, and I know I've been guilty of this as well, to say like, oh, I think if only people implemented a really structured phonics-based approach, then everyone would learn to read. It's like, yes, that would help so, so much, but that is not the only thing that is causing the opportunity gap. And so because there's just so many factors that go into the opportunity gap and why it's there, I think one of the biggest lessons that I've had is that it's so important to have a multi-pronged approach to solving it. And yes, like having really strong standards aligned instruction is part of it, but so many factors again go into education. Housing policy is a huge part of education because where students live determines oftentimes where they end up going to school. Fair wages is a huge part of it, and like employment justice, thinking about like racial justice. There are so many different components that go into education and the opportunity gap. And I think a lot of times in society, we like to sort of think that education can just fix everything. Like thinking about, for example, student meals. Like the way that we help support children in the United States who don't have access to 3 meals a day is by feeding them at school, for example. And we provide health clinics at school for students who don't have access to health things. And so like those pieces are so important, but it's also thinking about like, okay, how can these systems work together and help support education, and help ultimately support not only the educational outcomes of students, but their outcomes as a whole.
Your background in policy is evident as you talk, which is amazing because it really puts things into perspective and shows that there's not one solution that can fix everything regarding the gap in education.
Yeah. And so that's why, I think if folks are interested in working to close that opportunity gap, then it's not like the only way to do so is to become a teacher. Yes, that is a huge thing that more and more people need to do and to explore, but obviously that path isn't for everyone, and so there's so many different ways that you can get at it. And I think that in some ways, there's a role for everyone to be able to play.
That's such an important outcome. And onto the community reading buddies, what made you want to be a part of it, and what changes did you implement as the director of CRB?
Yeah, so I wanted to be part of community reading buddies because I I saw the work that they were doing, and I was really blown away by the not only the outcomes that the organization was achieving in terms of the results for students, but also the commitment and the dedication of the mentors who are part of it. And I thought it was a really just special organization with some really committed individuals that were part of it. And so I saw that and I wanted to be a part of that. And I thought there were so many opportunities to really leverage that one-to-one tutoring experience for students that we could really, make as meaningful as possible. And so um, I think one of the big things that was important to me when I came in was to make sure that not only our mentors, but our staff as well had a really good foundation for what it meant to teach and support young students in literacy. Because we have a finite amount of time with our students, and so we want to make sure that we're maximizing every single minute. And so one of the things that was really important to me, and I think has since become really important to our staff, is the how do we use that time and how do we build it so that it's individualized for every student, at their need, and is exactly going to be the thing that helps propel them onto the next reading level.
What did the experience as director of community reading buddies teach you about literacy and education as a whole?
Yeah, I think it taught me, I think it really helped solidify my already held belief that like it really does take a village to help support this cause and this work because uh again, it's yes, teachers and administrators and all these other people like absolutely play a role, but 14 or 15-year-old high school student can also play a role and can help a student reach grade level in reading for the first time. And so I think it's really just solidified my belief that there is a role that each of us can play. And it's really been cool to see like what that looks like over time.
Yeah, I have been a part of CRB for about 3 years now, and some of the changes that you've implemented are so beneficial and so helpful, and it's truly made such an impact in the program.
Great. Well, I'm really glad to hear that. And I think that's one thing that is important to us as well, is that was partially a response to feedback that we had received from our mentors saying like, I want some more support. I want some more resources in terms of how I can help my buddies who are struggling with these skills. And so we wanted to really build that out for them. And that's something that, we continue to be open and eager for feedback. So that way we can support you all who are ultimately doing the work and supporting our students.
Yeah, thank you so much. And as your role as executive director of Aspire Education, what made you want to take on that role, and what does some of your work entail?
Yeah, I think I was excited about being able to support the work of not just community reading buddies, but the work of Aspire as a whole. And so Aspire provides tutoring, supports, and services to students throughout the Bay Area, and specifically as a nonprofit, historically underserved students. And so we know that um, tutoring is typically very expensive and is often only for students of a certain socioeconomic status. And so, what we do is we partner with fellow organizations across the Bay Area, to like YMCA and Boys and Girls Club and others, to be able to provide high quality small group and one-to-one academic tutoring below market rate. So that way these students, they don't have to pay anything for getting this really high quality tutoring and can really benefit from it. And so I was excited to be able to support again the work of Aspire Education as a whole and really advance that, and while also advancing the work of community reading buddies. And I think really I've realized that in this role, like yes, I support with our programming, but more than anything my role is to clear the pathway for people who are doing the work. And so I want to enable the conditions that make the direct services happen. And so I really work to ensure that we have enough funds and grants and donations so that way the work can continue. And I work to make sure that these sorts of barriers don't affect the people who are the ones doing the work and the ones closest to the work.
It's amazing. All the work that you and the entire organization has put in is such a wonderful thing and truly helps so many people. What are some of your future goals in your work at Aspire?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot is how we continue to build our partnerships with other organizations and with other school districts across the Bay Area. We have a pretty strong presence within Oakland specifically, but we are a Bay Area organization and we want to ensure that we are, there is need throughout the Bay Area. And so we want to ensure that we are able to build those partnerships so that we can support that need. And so we're in an exciting place right now in terms of being able to build and continue to grow our network and our work and the number of students that we serve. And so that's really sort of what the next couple of years I think at Aspire will look like.
I think that Aspire would definitely benefit the entire Bay Area, and I really hope that you're able to promote it so this can happen.
Thank you. Me too.
Do you have any advice for students or anyone who wants to get more involved in addressing the gap in education and the literacy gap?
Yeah, so I think, the first thing is just to learn more about it. I think it's something that, again, if a student cannot read, their life trajectory is really limited. And so I think it's really important that's, other students who want to get more involved in this know what that looks like and sort of know the consequences for it. And I think once more people know about it, I think it's hard not to be passionate about it. And then, like I mentioned earlier, I think there's so many different ways for people who want to be able to get involved. If folks want to, tutor and mentor and work one-on-one with students, they can absolutely do that. But there's also, so many other ways that organizations like ours need help and need support. And so maybe you don't necessarily want, your skill set is not necessarily working one-on-one with a student. That's okay. But maybe you're really awesome at website building and design, and you want to offer your services to an organization who's like building up their website, or maybe you want to, help put on an event or help fund a book drive. There's so many different ways that you can really support. And so I just encourage folks who are interested to figure out what it is that they're passionate about and figure out like what their skill set is and how those two can align. And I think that that there's a lot of good that they're able to do.
I always say awareness is the first step for action. And as you've said, it truly takes a village to make organizations like Aspire happen. And it's really important for people to realize that there's so many skill sets that absolutely benefit to these organizations. So I think that's really important to mention. So thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there anything else you want to add about your work, education in general, or CRB or Aspire?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is that we are always looking for more folks to continue to support our work. We cannot do this work without our amazing mentors. So if you're interested in becoming a mentor, if you're interested in learning more, you can feel free to check out our website at communityreadingbuddies.org. And if you're interested in supporting our work, financially, that is always something that we're looking for as well, whether that's something if you're able to connect us to other people, again, especially as we build out and help support the Bay Area, we know that the need is there. And so really we want to make sure that we have the resources to be able to support and meet that need ultimately. But thank you.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. I have already learned so much from your talk, and I'm sure other people will as well. Thank you so much again.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nandana.